Good afternoon, everybody. So I was going to talk for 5 minutes about, does Europe have the talent to lead the next wave of innovation in AI? And talent really counts. At Zeki, we have identified the top 300,000 AI innovators globally. And we help companies hire the very, very best people, the top 1%. And we help investors fund the most talented teams. And we know from our data and the regression modeling we do on it, that companies that hire the very, very best talent will see an exponential increase in their innovation in a very short period of time. So I was going to talk about 3 waves of innovation that I see. So the first wave is generative models. So this is large language models that are trained on the data of the internet, ChatGPT being the obvious first example. But there are also information world models, models that are trained also on learning from and interacting with the world that we live in, the physical world. And then, of course, we have agents. We have these tools that will sit on top of these models, and they will talk to us. They will allow us to do stuff. So generative models. So there is a consensus at the moment that anybody who's working on building a large language model is the elite in AI talent. And when we compare that group of people to a comparison group, it's true. They score much higher in terms of productivity. They will score higher in terms of the initiative they take in their work. They put a lot of thought leadership back into the community. And they also are much more visible and have very high reputations around their peer group. But this group is increasingly concentrated in some of the biggest US tech companies in the world. So Google and Google DeepMind now have 65+% of this share of this talent. And you can see that Google is starting to merge its team and build the brains of its business around LLMs in the UK and around Google DeepMind. Unfortunately, Mistral, the great hope in France, only has 1% of this market, trailing along the bottom with Anthropic, and I can't see that changing. Anthropic has a secret source, and I can talk to anybody about that after this event, and you can see OpenAI is still building its team. But will this be the talent that drives the next wave of innovation? I'm not convinced. This talent has very, very concentrated skills. It has skills specifically in 8 areas of innovation in AI. There are at least 100. It's very, very homogeneous. And it tends to look the same. They're much more likely to go to a top-tier university. They're 3 times as likely to have interned at one of the big 7. It doesn't feel that they have the neurodiversity, the diversity of background to lead solely the next wave of innovation. So who might? Who might lead the next wave of innovation around those world models, teaching computers to interact, learn from the physical world? So we thought we'd look at NVIDIA. NVIDIA, potentially the most innovative company in the world. Are they hiring the same people as Google and Google DeepMind? Or are they hiring different people who are, more involved in sensors, in automation, in perception, and how computers can explain and learn from the physical world? And the answer is that over the last 3 years, NVIDIA has hired 3 times as more people in that world model category than it has in that generative AI model category. So what does that mean for Europe? The story is not great on generative AI. As we've said, America has captured that talent. It has 4 times as much of that talent as Europe. It doesn't mean that there isn't money to be made here, that there's many applications to apply this technology and monetize it in the market, deriving new billion-dollar companies, great efficiency and productivity at more traditional enterprises. But when you look at what we describe as the world-leading skills, Europe is neck and neck with the USA. So if you're a government, if you're a regional authority, if you're a large company, where are you going to put your innovator dollar? VCs can cover all this space, but where are you going to go if you're looking strategically at the next wave? And I would say that Europe has a fair chance here in a way that it no longer does here. And then finally, agents. We found this is a very fragmented market. It's still growing. We found one very, very specific skill set that both European and US companies were seeking in the market, which is at the cutting edge of a computer being able to talk to you. And we mapped how European companies were doing to USA, and it looks pretty good. But the companies are very different. In America, you're seeing companies hiring this very specific skill set who are really specialists in conversational AI, like Cerence and Nuance. Whilst in Europe, it is the more traditional companies, Orange, BMW, telecoms, automotive industry, that are kind of trying to push this technology into their traditional processes. So in summary, thank you very much. I think Europe has the ingredients for the next wave. It will need to be pragmatically positive, as you say, but I would say it's in a better place than it tends to think it is.
Thank you, Tom. Fantastic. Why don't you take a seat? Go in the end.
I'll go in the end.
Yeah. And then we're going to get Andreas and Tommy up. So, Andreas, please. Over here, Tommy. Actually, let's put the Tommy here, so we've got the Andreas in between the Tommy and the Tom, so I don't get confused.
The Tom sandwich.
A Tom sandwich. You are the meat in the Tom sandwich. Are we ready to have some fun, everybody, on this question?
Let's do it.
Okay, briefly from Tommy, kind of one sentence, who you are, why are you relevant for this panel?
I am a technology entrepreneur turned investor. I run Giant Ventures, which is a venture firm backing purpose-driven technology entrepreneurs. So we back the brightest, the best, ambitious entrepreneurs who are using technology to build multi-billion-dollar companies, which are also solving problems that actually matter.
Great. That was a very long sentence, but he did it in one sentence. Andreas, why are you here, other than to give me headaches?
I already told him that I will be a little bit more annoying on this panel, so let's see if I can keep up to my promise. I was founding team and CTO of a few companies in San Francisco, among others Product Hunt, AngelList, OnDeck, a few of those. Nowadays, I'm running a microfund, invest globally, like India, Europe, America. And currently, a lot of my time goes into lobbying of all things. As an ex-engineer, I'll be working directly with the European Commission to establish essentially a pan-European legal entity. We call it the EU Inc. And the goal is basically of an equivalent to the Delaware Inc. and the YC Safe Note, but for the European Union.
Right. So you see the trifecta we have here. We have talent, we have legal institutional frameworks, that's your bag, and then, Tommy, we've got the capital and the company building. When was the last time a Silicon Valley company was scared of a European company? Tommy?
Never.
Never?
Never.
Yeah.
I still think there is a huge underestimation of European talent and technology from the US, and I think it's actually accelerated in the last 6 months. I think the kind of MAGA movement, the Trump-Musk complex, the Europeans actually who are in Silicon Valley self-hating on Europe, that all we can do is regulate AI. We have no innovation. We have a fervor to regulate things, but an inability to build things. And it's getting worse and worse. I don't actually think it really matters, as long as Europeans don't buy into it. And what I really dislike is I think you do get quite a few European venture capitalists and entrepreneurs who are constantly moaning about Europe is no good, we're falling behind, we're regulating too much, rather than just getting on with it and building. And we do build absolutely exceptional technology companies here in Europe.
Yeah. Andreas, do you agree with Tommy?
I agree. There's too many people complaining. There's also a lot of people being a little bit naive about structural problems. So it's kind of a little bit both. This is why I hate the memes about Europe, because half of them, differently, I hate them because they're fundamentally wrong, and I hate them because they're fundamentally right. You know what I mean? It's kind of like
that's like Schrödinger's meme, and I feel you've set yourself up to give us an example of one of those memes.
The whole aspect around regulation, for example. So we are definitely over-regulating. in many aspects. Like the problem we have in regulation is a lot of it is around essentially creating paper trails to avoid potential risks. So you basically have to hire full-time people for cybersec, AI, and a few other things, just creating paper trail nowadays, and the multiple other bureaucracies. But the biggest problem we actually have in Europe is fragmentation. The biggest, like, there's a word which is called a European startup ecosystem, which is inherently a lie. There is no European startup ecosystem. Like less than 18% of all early stage investing is pan-European. Or differently put, if you don't have local investors, you're pretty much screwed raising quickly around, and you most likely won't get it from experts. So until we fix that, we don't even have a pan-European or like an actual European ecosystem. So there's like multiple things that need to be fixed on structural level, and those in reality are also regulation, and those are again, like you actually have to fix them on a European level, you know what I mean? That's kind of like both.
Right. Well, one of the structural differences may also be in employment law. And in labor law, I've talked to a number of storied American venture capitalists in the last weeks, and they sort of joke about the labor laws here, the employment laws, in the sense that in California, famously, there are no non-competes and there's at-will employment. When you look at talent, Tom, to what extent do you think the differences in employment regulation hinder the Europeans being able to accumulate the talent they need to build the kind of companies that Tommy will fund?
The reality is they're going to need a lot less talent because, you know, as we are all experiencing in the startup world, you need half the number of engineers than you did. If you are genuinely an AI-first company and everything you do from building your stack to your marketing goes through an LLM, you need half the number of people that you used to need.
Wait, so we're going to end run really cumbersome employment regulation and 35-hour work weeks because of AI?
Yeah.
Wow, that is. I didn't see that one coming.
Yeah.
The argument is because we don't employ them.
Because we designed it out in the sense that you just need half as many people as you used to do 6 months ago.
Yeah, I'm slightly speechless as a moderator as an idea. I'm trying to process that. So maybe you can step in and help me here, Tommy. What do you make of that? What do you make of that? Do you think the employment regulations are actually need to be reviewed for the innovation economy? I mean, I'll think about it in this term, right? If you are one of these triple PhDs who's being pursued by, Mistral or one of your portfolio companies or Anthropic, do you really need protections in the employment market the same as if you're someone my age who's been working in a car company for 30 years?
Look, I think it's not crucial, but it would be a really good thing to change. So very, very concretely, we have 50% of our investments are in the US, 50% are in Europe. The European ones, very good companies go through cycles of overhiring, and they need to let some people go because they've got to hit some milestones. It happens, good companies do that. It is so hard for the European companies to cut their workforce so that they can stay alive. And there are specific examples in Europe of companies which would have been great but died because you've got to give people 6 months notice, it's extremely expensive. So yeah, for sure, that would be better, and it would be very easy, I think, for governments to do, to look at going, okay, for innovation companies under X many employees, you can have at-will employment like California. It wouldn't be that difficult to do. And for the employees of Europe, you know what game you're getting into, right? You know that you're going to go join a startup and it's not a job for life. So I think it's a win-win for everyone, and it would not be that difficult to implement.
I want to come to Andreas on this, but you were nodding, Tom.
Yeah.
So is your understanding that the talent that you've looked at understands the dynamic Tommy's talked about?
Absolutely. So when we look at the data at the PhDs, not just the triple PhDs, the PhDs, 51% of them are now working in a country where they didn't train, basically, or educated. And they stay in their roles for between 18 months and 2 years, and then they move.
Right. So it's that fast, this super high-end AI talent, right?
Yeah, very, very quick and dynamic.
Yeah. So Andreas, is this a big contributing factor, do you think?
I think it's a hot topic. I think that's the main one. And especially it's a culturally very differently approached topic in Europe. And you can compare different markets if you want. Personally, I'm less worried about companies being able to fire quickly. What I would prefer is if the employee can quicker leave. So if you have a high talent, high caliber potential candidate, that you can get them within a reasonable amount of time, like 2 to 4 weeks, so that this person has the option to leave earlier. I have multiple investments where the company went basically hypergrowth, and the only way to actually keep up with their internal demands was to hire outside of Europe, not because they couldn't find the talent, because they had to wait 3 months for the talent to come to them, even if they wanted to and already signed. And 3 months is a lot of time for like an early stage company frequently. So for personally, I care less about companies not being able to overhire and underfire, like all this kind of stuff. That's something we have to fix, but that's also a cultural issue to some extent. I care more about the talent having the mobility they need to actually create a very liquid market of top-tier talent.
Yeah. Does that resonate with your founders then, that when they're trying to grow quickly, that there is this 90-day wait?
For sure, it resonates with our founders and with us. You know, at Giant, we're trying to hire people, grow the firm, and yeah, you've got to wait 3-6 months. It just slows everything down. And the single most important determinant of success in startups, I believe, is speed. And we slow people down in Europe. But I would just reiterate, it's not an excuse. We have in Europe exceptional talent. We have, around the corner from where we are at Giant, 4 out of the world's top 10 universities within an hour. We have more than enough capital for great entrepreneurs at pretty much every stage of the capital stack until IPO. And I don't want to derail things, but to me, that's the single biggest thing we've got to fix in Europe, is we have to have functioning public market investors who value high growth technology companies over slow and steady profits. And until we fix that, that's the big missing piece in Europe.
I have a different opinion on this.
Good.
Actually.
I love different opinions.
I don't think we have a problem that the investors don't want to invest. I think the biggest problem we have in Europe is we don't have enough company with early stage momentum to the point that they get escape velocity. And a huge part for me personally here is fragmentation. It's just like in the very early stage, it's just really, really hard to raise quickly. Later on, it's really hard to get customers pan-European and so on and so on. There's like multiple aspects where like having a unified market in the States is like a completely different force of acceleration. And to me, personally, the biggest issues we have in Europe is we don't have enough breakout velocity companies. And this is like, a lot of this comes down to structural issues. And without those, we don't get the growth companies. Without those, we don't get the scale companies. And without those, we don't have the big companies that actually drive R&D and even investments in the modern world.
So I want to unpick that a little bit, actually, because I probably sat on Tommy's side of that question, which is thinking, you know, to get a $100 million company, you need a $1 billion company, you need a $10 billion company, therefore you need to have the decacorn and so on and so forth. And you're saying actually what we need is the bottom-up velocity. Yes. And you said there were structural issues that we could tackle. So what are those particular structural issues that could deliver that breakout velocity, and how would you tackle them? Cool.
Quick question to the audience. Who here is not from Germany? Okay, cool. So let me explain you quickly something for context, okay? In Germany, if you want to, I'm Austrian, so I'm almost like obliged to make fun of it, but we have the same issue. In Germany, if you want to create a company, like let's say we two agree this is an amazing idea, let's go and let's create this company. What we have to do is we have to meet an elder of our community who comes to us into a special room with like a big board where all of us sit, all of us who want to start a company, all of the investors, everybody, and the elder of the community will read to us our own shareholder agreement for like an hour. Everybody sits there, nods, regrets the decisions in life, thinks about like all the mistakes that got them here to suffer through this for 45 minutes. And then you sign a few papers, you handshake, and now you're officially a real company recognized by your tribe, by your community, by your village. And this is like, this whole system is like absolutely normal in Germany. If I explain this to any American, in America I go to somebody and be like, hey, you're amazing, you work at Google. Do you want to quit your job and work on this thing and make a big company out of it? And I'm like, no problem. This person is in Boston, they go to a website, click, 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 they have a company. They go afterwards, send me an email, a DocSend link with a YC safe. I sit in the middle of San Francisco, I sit in Africa, doesn't matter. I click a button, I have invested. In Europe, I go to the elders, I have a ceremony. Okay? Next
the only thing I would say to that is, obviously, it's completely ridiculous. It should be fixed. I will never angel invest in another Austrian company again, having been through that nonsense. But
and Germanism.
but any entrepreneur worth their salt in Germany or Austria can get through that. And if they can't get through that, they're not going to build a multi-billion-dollar business. And so it's annoying, but I don't think there's an excuse for truly great founders. It might put off people. And I think the bigger problem is if you're looking at the truly great platforms in Europe, Revolut, Octopus Energy. Revolut have said they will not go public on London. It's a UK fintech, right, close to $50 billion or whatever it is, and the guy's not going to take it public in London. The proceeds won't go back into the tax system, the angels, et cetera, et cetera. If we can't get that right, that is so fundamentally bad and a real limit on how big our ecosystem can get, and without that limit, there would be no limit.
So I agree and I disagree. The main part where I disagree, it's not about the company formation, and also I don't agree that like you have to throw in hurdles in the front of the founders because that somehow filters the best. Like customers and product should do that, you know what I mean?
I agree, yep.
It's more about the velocity of investment that's possible. And the fact that now these networks are actually interconnected. So for example, the fact like I wouldn't touch an Austrian GmbH unless I absolutely have to, you know, especially, or a German GmbH, unless it's like already vetted by multiple other VCs and whatever. I can't force them to do a Delaware anymore, you know. But like it's about the velocity that you get and the velocity you lose especially. I also agree on the exit market. Like there is no point in having an exit in Europe right now to a stock market. You need to go to the States right now. And this is fundamentally, if you look at this fundamentally comes down to this. Europe doesn't play as one block. They play as we play as individual countries, thinking we want to catch up so that we are still number 2 to the US and completely have lost the plot that there's already China and there's India coming afterwards. So all of a sudden it's about, can we even be number 4? And if we don't unite as a block and if we don't compete as a block and work as a block, there's no chance to do that.
I think that's right.
On Monday, something happens in Washington, DC.
What?
Start of a new sitcom.
Oh, yeah.
So something's going to change in the US. And you know, I think we know some of the characteristics of it. I think there was a sense of, I was in America just before the election and straight the week after, and there was actually a sense of levity amongst the business and investing community that they would be able to go out and invest and build companies. Not everyone had it. Universally, but it's clear there will be a lot of deregulation, but there will also be a greater degree of irascibility. There will be a greater degree of national sovereignty and national pride coming first. So we've got 3 or 4 minutes left, and I'm really going to ask you to all come out of your swim lanes a little bit at this point. What is that impact of Trump? Does it create an opportunity for European talent to build companies, or actually will the hyper-velocity US experience just magnify and drag in more of that talent? Maybe Tom will come to you first on that one. How's talent going to take Trump?
You're going to see deregulation in the US by the US. You're going to see regulation around the world from the US on us. So look at the AI diffusion regulation that's come out. They're deciding who's going to get the next generation of AI chips. That's regulation. So they are setting rules for us that are going to be kind of different to theirs. And we need to face the fact. We need to get real, I think, in Europe and sort of pragmatic, because we do have the talent. It's going to go into traditional industries. They're the most ones that are in trouble. And we have to kind of focus the effort around the things that we're very good at. We're going to have to put a lot more money into defense, and you're going to be talking about that tomorrow.
Right.
That's going to have to come from somewhere else. So Europe has to not be in denial, I would say, about a very, very assertive American trade policy.
Andreas, what do you think? What's Trump going to mean for your colleagues building companies here?
Let's deconstruct this. So the problem, like for example, like deregulation in the US, is doable because they have like one body they directly work with. In Europe, we have to do this on the European level and on the national level in each case. So some sense we have like 28 times, if you like include UK, and across like more than 30 times the amounts of regulations just by default, plus the European on top. So like this web creates by default a complexity that's hard to navigate. And this is like, I think, one of the core issues. I think what's interesting to me, at least right now, is we are in a global economic crisis since COVID, and a lot of stuff we just managed to delay until now. And the America reacts to this with like hyper-nationalism, isolationism. We are the best, everybody else is an idiot. Europe does a typical self-flagellation. Like, we suck, all of us suck, you suck, politicians suck, this guy over there sucks, everybody sucks. You know, nobody here has a clue. Like this kind of self-flagellation we do. The other problem we have is this is a global thing. So like this will also create like a lot of like reshaking of the whole continent. And we are currently like in a non-zero chance that we become a developing bloc. And this is something we have to like almost like get in a mindset of, like how would we act if we are already a developing bloc? Mm-hmm. What kind of like large moonshots would we actually do? And I will not because it's like running.
No, you're very good with the time. I love panelists like you. I'm going to come to you with a slightly different question then, because what you've both said is, the sense of getting real, and then Andreas, you said, look, we should recognize we have to get real and just sort of push through this. I was speaking with a venture capitalist from the US who invested in some of the early internet companies, and he said, it seems to me like Europe cares more about the past while America cares about the future. And he said it much more curtly than that. What could we do? What could we practically do over the next few years so the next time he brings that up with me, he'll say, oh, wow, Europe also thinks about the future?
3 practical things. 1, sort out the public markets. Stop having the sovereign wealth funds in Europe back venture capital firms that we don't need. Have them try to incentivize pension funds to back public market technology companies. 2, I would try to focus on the things that we're really good at. So the UK, we should be focusing on fintech, life sciences, and AI. And 3, related to that, try to use our industrial powerhouse in Europe, our corporates, as strengths rather than albatrosses around our neck. And here we've got the automotive companies in Germany. How do we make those companies spur innovation in the electric vehicle space, for example, rather than panicking that we're going to get outcompeted by China and have tariffs from the US? We've got to try and use our strengths as Europe as things that can spark innovation, not get out-innovated.
What a great way to wrap this up. Thank you so much, Tommy, Andreas, and Tom. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, Azeem. It was great.
We're still mic'd up.